You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 66.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast. Discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi everyone, I hope you're doing great. Today I speak with the incredible soprano Sondra Radvanovsky, and please allow me to use the term fangirling here because I'm such a huge fan of this gracious, wonderful artist. If you've ever heard her sing, you know what I mean, and if you haven't, you must treat yourself and check out some of her recordings. Sondra is a globally celebrated artist. The depth and exquisite color of her voice are matched by her dramatic acting ability and versatility across a remarkable range of repertoire. She's performed in every major opera house in the world, including the Royal Opera House, Teatro alla Scala, Opera House Zurich, the Metropolitan Opera, and numerous others. She's widely regarded as one of the premier Verdi sopranos alive today, as well as one of the premier interpreters of bel canto. Sondra trained at the Metropolitan Opera's Lindemann Young Artist Development Program and was singled out as a soprano to watch. On the concert platform, she sung with orchestras such as the Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco Symphony Orchestras, the Verbier Festival Orchestra, and the Bayerische Staatsoper. Sondra's recordings of Verdi's music have become critical hits and made several season best lists, including those of NPR and The New Yorker. She's also no stranger to the screen. She stars in a Naxos DVD of Cyrano de Bergerac alongside Placido Domingo, and she can be heard in numerous broadcasts of the wildly popular Met Live HD series. In our conversation, Sondra covers a variety of topics, including how she prepares for a role, the importance of understanding how we learn, performing at our best, and the importance of kindness in our field. As you'll be able to tell, I had a great time talking with Sondra. She has wonderful insight in store for you, and I know you will enjoy this episode. Let's go to the show. Sondra Radvanovsky, it's such a huge honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here.
Sondra, you have sang on stages across the world. We see you in the major opera houses. I've just had the pleasure of hearing you sing many times in the Queen of Spades here at the Chicago Lyric Opera. For those of my listeners who don't know about you, I'd love to hear your story in your own words. So I'd love to hear how you got to where you are today and how your artistic path has unfolded.
Well, there's the long version and the short version. I'll try to condense it a little bit. But I was born in Chicago in the Berwyn-Cicero area. And we moved out quickly after that to St. Charles. And then my father was transferred to Indiana, where I joined a church choir. And my church choir director said, probably in the first year, to my parents, this girl has a God-given talent. And my mom said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, I think she should start taking voice lessons. So one day I came home from church choir, and on the television was Placido Domingo singing Tosca live. And I pointed to the TV and I said to my mom at 11 years old, I want to do that. Fast forward to me being 24 years old, and I won the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions and was invited to be a member of their Young Artist Program, which is a 3-year training program and one of the best in the United States, North America, if not the world. And with that comes the opportunity of performing on stage with some of the best artists in the world. So I was very fortunate, and I was fast-tracked really to the world of the operatic world. And I made my Met debut at the age of 25 with Placido Domingo, funnily enough, the man who was the reason why I became an opera singer in a way. And, I haven't looked back since then. And that was 25 years now that I've been singing professionally. give or take a little bit. I made my operatic debut at 21, but in a little opera house in Richmond, Indiana called Whitewater Opera, which is no longer. But I still take it. It was my debut. And I did Mimi and La Boheme. So, and now here we are. I'm 50 years old and singing all around the world. And I touch wood every day and say how lucky I am that I have the best job in the world and I love what I do and I get paid to do it. So I still love doing it. Yeah, I'm sure you do the same thing.
It was so funny. After one of the concert, I met someone in the parking lot who was so excited because he says that he follows you everywhere and he goes from concert to concert everywhere you are.
Oh, it's funny that you really start to get this cult following of people, and you see them show after show after show. And now with social media and being so accessible on the internet, I get messages from these people saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be at the show," or I get messages from them saying, "This is my critique of your singing," and it's amazing. People, some of them are really brazen and say, "Well, you sang the first show better than the second show, and this note was better than that note." And hey, you know what? At least they're coming to the opera, and I appreciate that.
And where are some places where we can hear you sing soon?
Well, I leave tomorrow, actually, for Rio de Janeiro, not so close, for a concert there and a master class for the kids in the favelas, which for me teaching has really become my second passion now, as well as singing, but teaching children and adults as well how to sing and sing properly is my passion. And after that, I go directly to Berlin, the Deutsche Oper, to sing 3 performances of Aida and then a new production of Pique Dame. So this is my Pique Dame and Aida year, because after that I go to Vienna to sing Aida, and then I'm recording a new CD after that. Woohoo!
We'll be looking out for that one to come out for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's about time. So.
Sondra, you're talking about all of these roles, and that's one thing that fascinates me about vocalists is how you go about really preparing for a role, because obviously it's a little bit different of a process than for us instrumentalists. There's, acting involved, and of course you have to deal with costumes and learning the language. But what does that process look like for you to prepare for a role?
That's a really good question, because you're right. You, for people listening, you as an orchestra member have the music in front of you. You don't have to memorize it, but you're playing the whole night long, where I'm singing on and off the whole night. How do I prepare? It really depends from role to role. For instance, Pique Dame, the opera that we just did in Chicago, is in Russian, which is not a language that I speak, even though people look at my last name and assume that I speak Russian. I don't. So technically, I had to learn the Russian phonetically. So if someone were to say to me, "Ba ba bibe bo," I had to learn how to say "ba ba bibe bo" exactly like a Russian person would say it. And for almost a 4-hour long opera, it was very difficult. And I worked with 3 different Russian coaches just to get the Russian perfect, because some people might not know this, but I am a bit of a perfectionist, a bit of a type A personality. And if I'm going to do something, I want to do it 150%. So it was really my mission to get this Russian down. Musically, that said, this also was a different style of music for me to learn. So this opera took a little longer for me to get in my voice and in my body and in the words in my mouth and into my brain. So I will say that this was a good 6 months of hard work, nonstop. In the last 2 months, for sure, it was 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, really working on this music. And sometimes, for instance, if it's an Italian opera, because I speak Italian and I've done a lot of Italian music, it's very familiar to me. So I can learn an opera like that in going from opening the score to having it completely memorized in about 2 months' time. So it really depends upon the role. Then there's also different levels of knowing a role. There's being able to hold the score in front of me and to be able to sing through it, knowing all the notes, but not having memorized the words and not having memorized all of the music. And everybody learns it and memorizes differently. And I learned very on in my career, very early, that when I put movement with the words, when I'm walking, if I work out, if I go for a long walk, if I sit in my rocking chair here at home, I memorize much more quickly. And it's a very weird, random thing, but it's funny. Sometimes movement also with staging helps somebody remember a staging moment or the words in that moment. And so everybody is different for sure. And some people learn a lot quicker than I do. For instance, Christine Gerke, who is there doing the ring cycle right now in Chicago, is probably one of the quickest learners that I've ever met in my life. I swear she can sing through something once and it's memorized, and I hate her for that. But everybody, that's part of my job as a singer, was learning how I learned and how quickly or how slowly I learned. And as we grow older, it's funny, it gets quicker, but also the memory starts to go. And now that I'm 50, it's funny. I'm like, wait, I knew this opera 10 years ago. Why did I not remember it? So it's an interesting process, and it changes, from opera to opera.
Mm. It is indeed. Sounds very interesting. And memorization is such a tricky thing for all musicians, but I love hearing how thorough you are. And another thing you mentioned that I love is I often tell students to get to know themselves and get to know how they learn. And it really looks like you figured out what works best for you.
It's the key, I think, to being not just a singer, but any kind of musician. You have to know also, and very important for musicians, when to get up and walk away from the music, because you reach that point where you're saturated. And sometimes we as musicians have a tendency to push, saying, oh, well, I don't have enough time. I have to learn this. I have to learn this. But there's a point when it becomes detrimental to your learning. It's not going into the memory banks, as I call it. They're full. The data banks are full. You just have to step away. You have to walk away. And for me, taking a half an hour break even, and then coming back to it fresh and doing something completely different and random in that half an hour, like folding clothes or washing the dishes or going for a walk in the woods, because we live in the middle of the woods here in Toronto. And sometimes you just have to hit that reset button. And that is so key, I think, to all musicians, is just realizing when you can't push any more data, information into your brain.
Mm. Another thing that you mentioned is how you immerse yourself in this preparation process.
Yeah.
Do you oftentimes feel like the emotional aspect of a role or a character starts to influence you or takes a presence in your life?
Very infrequently now.
Mm.
When I was younger, a lot.
Mm.
I still can't sing the song to the moon in Rusalka without crying, because my father, finding him dead when I was young, so you even get teary now, and singing the fourth act aria in Trovatore, D'amor sulle rose, I still, every time I sing that, fight back tears. But I learned that there's a great aria from Adriana Lecouvre called Io son l'umile ancella, and I'm just a humble servant, is what she's saying. I'm a vessel for the music. And I learned very early on that if you get too emotionally close or attached to what you're singing, it's very good to get attached. But if you get overly attached, it affects your voice. It can affect your voice. And for me, it definitely affects my voice, because I start crying. And when you're crying, you can't sing. And, So you learn that there's a line in the sand that you can't cross emotionally. And I only learned that by crying my head off in the middle of a performance and going, wow, that's a problem because I'm done now. I can't sing anymore. And I learned that if I am feeling all of this emotion, oftentimes people in the audience will say, oh, that was a really nice show. And I'm saying to them, but whoa, I was emoting and I was feeling all of this. And they said, nope, didn't feel it. Whereas sometimes when I'm just reading the phone book and being cold and not thinking about the character so much, it flies out to the audience and they feel it. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, they're going to hate this because I was just not emoting or I wasn't emoting enough. And it's really conundrum because I want to feel it. You as a musician, right? You want to feel all of these Sturm und Drang, this Herz und Schmerz and all these emotions. But when I feel that, oftentimes the audience doesn't. So it's an interesting business what we do.
I love this analogy of being the vessel. I think that's beautiful.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you must feel the same way too.
Like you said, emoting, usually for us as instrumentalists, what happens, well, I'm sure it's the same for vocalists as well, is there's this desire, this very strong desire to communicate our emotions with the audience, which turns into physical tension.
Yes.
And that actually really inhibits the actual execution on the instrument.
Worded perfectly. Yes. And it's interesting also as a singer, we have another aspect of standing on stage, which is very naked in a way. Our emotions are raw. We're there just begging for them to like us. And sometimes that can also get in the way of our performance because we get this desire to please and this desire for them to want to like us so much that it overtakes our characterization and our vocalization as well. And sometimes if people could actually hear the subcontext that goes on in my head during an opera, it sometimes has nothing to do with the character at all. Sometimes it's, Sondra, don't be stupid. Stop doing that, or don't fall when you're jumping up on the bench. And, it has nothing to do with the character, but it, in a way, is my inner dialogue to tell me to basically loosen up, be free, and most importantly, be in the moment.
Yes, that's very, very important.
Yeah. And that's one that I learned later in life as opposed to earlier in life. But being in the moment and really reacting to everything in the moment, because we as opera singers, we know what's going to happen in the next moment, right? The audience members don't. And it's so hard not to telegraph, okay, I have I'm going to die now, or for instance, in this Peak Dawn that I just did with you in Chicago, I kill myself in a very interesting way. And it was very hard for me not to telegraph that I have this plastic bag in my hand. And in 2 seconds, I'm going to kill myself with this over my head. It was very hard to stay in that moment of what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next?
Yes. Sondra, one question I have, and I hope that I can ask it in the way that makes sense. I'm really fascinated by the way technique works for a vocalist. And I was thinking about it this week and thinking about the fact that for you guys, this visualization in terms of what you hear in your head must be so strong, because for us, I'll use the violin. I play the violin. If I want to play in tune, I mean, there's some technical things I can do if my finger needs to land there. And yes, of course, I can practice intonation, but I can see my fingers and I can very easily control my fingers. And there's an aspect of technique on an instrument that is very visual. And of course, we need to have a really strong image or idea of the sound that we want to produce. But it's so different for you guys with the organ being a part of your body. So I'm really curious about how that works for a singer? This how does a singer practice or work on the technical aspects?
It's a really great question. And you're right, because your instrument is tangible. You can touch your instrument. My instrument, unless I have some kind of machine, I can't touch my instrument.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing that I learned in my career was everybody is different in the way that they think about technique. If there was one way of singing, we would all be perfect. If there was one way of playing the violin, we would all be perfect. And I learned that some singers, I should say this, learn by listening. Other singers learn and have a technique by feeling.
Mm.
And I am a singer that, because I get very fooled by acoustics of a theater. For instance, the Lyric Opera is a large, dry theater acoustically for us as singers on the stage, because it is such a long hall and you don't get a lot of reverb back, which is very easy to rely on that sometimes. And if you don't hear it, the tendency is for us as singers to push the sound. So I learned very early on, I am a person that needs to feel it in the right place in my voice, wherever that sound is vibrating properly, and also a little bit in sound as well, because I know that when my high notes sound really shrill to my ear, it's proper and it's the correct technique. Because I am further away from my ears, my eustachian tubes, my eardrums, when I get it more in the front, it's further away. The sound is further away from where I hear, which is my ear, and it's going out instead of me listening to it and going back. But everyone has a different way of figuring out technique. Some people use imagery as well, thinking about a tube of air, that's constantly flowing. I personally don't use imagery. I like to think very technically. I like to think I need to lift the hard palate or the soft palate or my molars, and I need to engage my support and all of that. But it really is hard, now that I'm teaching more too, to find a vocabulary to talk to singers and say, yeah, okay, if I tell them an imagery thing and that doesn't work, then if I tell them a technical thing and that doesn't work, then I tell them, well, listen to yourself and that doesn't work. It's very hard to find a way to kind of crack the nut for some people and get your idea from your brain into their brain. And I'm sure my teacher, my old teacher, Ruth Falcon, who is in New York, I think she was a saint trying to find a way to tell me, okay, no, not this, but how about this? And how about this? And how about that? And I tell you, she earned her salary 20 times over trying to teach me how to sing and sing properly and with good technique.
That's fascinating. And you know what it makes me think is, I think all of us instrumentalists would really gain in sitting in a few voice lessons, or maybe even taking some voice lessons, because oftentimes a phenomenon I see and I've experienced too is a teacher will show us how to do something, and because it's hand positioning, let's say, they can move our fingers, they can physically take a finger and show us how we should do it, and it's so easy for us to stop at that and not explore how that translates from the viewpoint of our own mechanics and how our fingers move and the shape of our hands.
Yeah.
But it inspires me as a teacher as well to really find the words to guide students how to figure it out for themselves.
Yes.
Because I cannot experience their gestures and their movements. I can see if a hand position looks correct and I can offer advice on how to move it, but that might not be the right hand position for that specific person. So I think it would be so interesting for instrumentalists to sit in vocal lessons and hear the kind of guidance they could really assimilate and see how they can, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but they could really.
Well, It does for me because when I was at Tanglewood, their summer program, Yo-Yo Ma gave a master class, and I learned so much from watching him teach and play another cello player because he plays that cello like a singer sings. And he breathes with the line. And that was one thing that I really took away from watching that, is that instrumentalists have to breathe just like singers do. And my mind was blown when he said that. And then his other thing that he said was that also playing for an opera as an instrumentalist is different than playing with an orchestra, symphonic orchestra. And I asked him, I said, can you expound on that, please? And he said, well, we have to breathe with the singers if you're doing opera as an instrumentalist. Whereas when you're playing with a symphony orchestra, you have to have the sound kind of be not homogeneous, but it all has to be interwoven in a way that operatic has another level to it. And I was so taken by that. And I thought, well, yeah, because choral singing is different than singing solo too. And you're right. I think that instrumentalists would do themselves good coming to a voice lesson, and vice versa with singers going to an instrumentalist lesson as well.
Because one thing I've been repeated over and over in my life, and when I started to realize that it's true, and now I say it to my students all the time, is how would you sing this phrase? And when you know how you would sing it, usually you're able to work around the specific technical aspects of the instrument and make it sound like that. So that would be really interesting to take some singing lessons for that aspect as well.
I think everything that we do, every musician, instrumentalists, singers, everything, it's based on breath and breathing and keeping that breath flowing, because the music always has to be on the breath. And so it's the same for instrumentalists as well as singers, I think.
Yes, I love that. And, speaking of that, how does it work for you with such a busy career? How do you care for yourself and for your voice when you have to juggle traveling, so many performances, all of that?
Oh, well, that's a really tough one. And it's one that's constantly changing because the world is changing so much right now with the coronavirus, number one. But number two, traveling. When I first started my career, as I've said, I was 21 when I did my first opera, and I'm 50 now. So it was well before 9/11 and before all these travel bans. Travel right now is so difficult, and it's only getting worse, and it's exhausting. And people expect you, for instance, I have to fly to Berlin and get directly off the plane and go into a rehearsal. And, you're sitting on a plane for 8 or 10 hours, and you're dry and you're sleep deprived and you're jet lagged. And, oftentimes they just don't care. They think that, well, you're here, you have to rehearse, and it should be perfect. And it's really just, you learn how much time you need as a singer, as a human being. You make sure you get as much sleep as you can. And I've had to say no to so many social events and things because, my voice is my instrument, but it's also how I communicate. And if I'm emotionally exhausted, it shows up in my voice. If I'm going through a stressful situation with my family, such as I have been going through the last year, it shows up in your voice. If you're fatigued, if you're ill, it shows up in your voice. And people in the audience don't know that. People have paid $100, $150, $300 for a ticket. And they expect every time that you open your mouth, they expect that you're going to be singing 100%. And they want that, and they want their money's worth. And they don't know that maybe I had a fight with my husband that day, or my mother is not feeling well, or. So it's very interesting. And I have learned to kind of create two separate personalities, and I'm not bipolar, but I have my private Sondra, and then I have my more public persona, which I call Sandy Singer. And you really learn to differentiate between the two, because Sondra is the one that takes care of Sandy Singer in a way. I have to make sure that I take care of myself, that I drink enough water, that I really don't talk too much the day of a show, and make sure that I don't over fatigue myself, and that I don't cram too much into my schedule, because it's very easy to see, oh, I have a free day. Let's fill that with voice lessons. Oh, let's fill that with interviews. And Sondra in the back of my brain is going, stop. No, you need to stay at home in your pajamas and just rest that day. And it's really hard to do that, but you have to find, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me, a balance. And both our careers are all about finding a balance, not just with singing, but with personal life too, and vacation, and my husband and my family. And finding that balance is like the holy grail. It's the holy grail. And I'm always searching for that holy grail of balance between personal life and singing life. And I still don't think I found it. So for all of the young singers out there and young musicians, it's a constant quest and search for that balance. And am I singing too much? Am I singing not enough? I don't know. I really, to that, I don't have the answer for everybody, but I know that I'm happy.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Sondra, a few weeks ago, you had a post on social media that really resonated with me. And
thank you. Yay!
You were talking about kindness in the workplace. And I just feel, as you said, times are changing. And I feel like there's a real wave in the classical music world where I think we're all yearning for, solidarity and friendship. And I think people are tired of competition and tyrannical conductors and such things. And so I wanted to hear a little bit about this from you, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. It's I hope that post didn't sound like a rant, but I had stepped away from social media for quite a few months, because I've been dealing with a lot of family issues with my mother and such. And I just couldn't read another unkind post or disingenuous post from another musician. And while I was dealing with an ill mother, and I just had to step away, because I felt so overwhelmed by the negativity that we as musicians, as singers, show to each other. And I'm thinking, we're all in this together. We are all with the same goal in mind, and that is lifting the audience's spirits with our music, with our musicianship, with what we do, our gift that we as musicians have been given, this ability to transform people's lives for those few hours that we're in front of them. And my goal is to, for that time that I'm on stage, to just lift them up and to carry them along and take all of their worries and problems away just for that time, and for them to feel everything that we're feeling on stage. And I think the whole world needs kindness right now. We are in a society that is just so negative and so condescending and so critical of everyone right now, that wouldn't it just be easier to approach everything with love and light and kindness than to knock each other down? Why not lift each other up? And it frees the soul. And I find that since I posted that, my singing has gotten better, because I too will be the first to admit that some days I'm extremely negative. And it's easier to be negative in a way than it is to be positive and to take that moment and to compliment someone as opposed to just criticize them. And so, yeah, maybe it's my mission now on social media and in the world to just love everybody and shower them in kindness. And I know it sounds utopian and blah, blah, but it's my passion and it's my thought, and it doesn't have to be everyone else's, but that's what my goal now is to do that.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sondra, how about a round of rapid fire questions?
Woohoo! Okay, let's go.
For the people who are dreaming of a career that resemble yours, can you tell us a little bit about what your life looks like?
Suitcases. I live in suitcases. That is my life.
How about a favorite book that you would recommend to our listeners?
I haven't read a book in ages because the moment I sit down to read a book, I fall asleep. It's the truth. I'm so sorry. It is my goal. It is my goal when I go to Rio and sit on the beach to read a book. So
that's yeah, I've had a hard time with this now. So now I listen to audiobooks in the car.
Oh, see, and I don't drive anywhere, so I can't listen to audiobooks because I'm never home. I'm never home to drive. We're gone on the road 11 months out of the year. So my 3 suitcases. I'm trying. I have a new Dan Brown book, I think. So I'm just going for, not heavy duty readings, just easy reading for right now.
I'm really curious about this one. What's your favorite tool in the practice room and why?
The mirror. And the mirror is my favorite tool because I think every singer should look at their vocal position, and pulling tongue tension and jaw tension are the easiest fixes to a tight voice. Getting rid of that and looking in the mirror is the way to do that.
What skills do you think young musicians studying today should acquire in addition to learning to play their instruments or mastering their voice?
Languages. Language skills, I think, is very important because nowadays you have to sing in every language. That and breath support, but that's back to my technique. I think all singers need to learn how to sing on the breath instead of tight.
Yeah. Instrumentalists as well, I think.
Yes. Tight is just tight. Tight is not emotion. Tight is just tightness. And a lot of singers think that, oh, I'm emoting, but you're just tight.
I'm going to start using that.
Tension is just tension. I'm sorry. It's not emotion.
What doubts or resistance have you had to face on this journey?
So many. I think my biggest resistance was a polyp on one of my vocal cords that I had from when I was a child. And that was my biggest obstacle in my career and overcome after my surgery. And I'm a huge proponent of vocal surgery now, if needed. And that was 2002, and I've gone on to still have my career. Yay.
Absolutely. What's a habit that you have that you think has contributed to your success?
Persistence. Also, I'm not afraid of change, and I am a risk taker. So I learn the best by trying something on stage and either succeeding greatly or failing miserably. But I learn from my failures, and I think that has taught me a lot.
That's really great.
Thank you.
Is there a performance that has stayed with you throughout the years? And if so, why?
Yes, I would say one that has haunted me was when I sang, the one and only time that I sang Suor Angelica in Los Angeles, a new production with the director William Friedkin, who directed the movie The Exorcist. And it was life-altering on so many levels. The music, the character, the story. But working with William Friedkin changed the way that I am as a singer and as an actress on stage. And I am forever grateful for that experience. And I don't think I'll ever be able to top that.
Mm. What is the best advice that was ever given to you that you would like to pass on to the listeners?
Oh boy, I have so much advice in my best advice ever passed on. Probably from William Friedkin. And he taught me that less is more.
Mm.
And that was not just with my acting, but with my singing. Less is more. Oftentimes we pile on this and that and this and that. And he said to me, Sondra, just shut up and sing. And, he was right. We over analyze it. It's not brain surgery. We're just singing. We're opening our mouths, and it's modified speaking. It's not more than that. And people overanalyze it. And when it comes down to it, you have to just put your fingers on the strings and vibrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to put air through my vocal cords and make my vocal cords vibrate like your strings vibrate, instead of doing all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just open your mouth and sing,
That's very good. Sondra, how about a quick actionable tip that listeners could implement today in their musical lives?
Allow the music to move you.
Mm.
Oftentimes we as musicians look at it as a job, and it's sometimes we forget the reason why we're doing what we're doing. And I think so many people, we can say that to anybody in their daily lives. They have a job, and there's a reason why they chose that profession. Don't forget that.
Mm. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And we love what we do, and there's a reason why you and I are doing what we do. And that's because I truly love singing and I love music.
Sondra, I'm such a huge fan. I just love
Thank you.
Your incredible artistry. You're such a gracious lady. And I am so honored that you took this time today to sit with me and chat. I feel very self-conscious that I'm using your vocal cords so much this morning.
Oh, well, I am actually right now just relaxing before leaving. I had when you talk about schedule, we had a week planned into my schedule here of just downtime. I call it pajama time, here in our house, and just relaxing and walking in the woods. And it's me time. It's Sondra time. So you have not taken away from that at all.
Thank you so much, Sondra. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sondra Radvanovsky. Let's keep the discussion going and let Sondra and I know what your favorite takeaways from today's episodes are. You can find us both on Facebook and Instagram. She's Sondra Radvanovsky and I'm Mind Over Finger. Of course, I'll have all the information on how to contact us and more details about Sondra and her career and a link to her website and some of her YouTube videos in the show notes. And speaking of which, I'd like to invite you to visit mindoverfinger.com to find the show notes, more information about mindful and efficient practice and performance preparation, and to sign up for my newsletter to be the first to know about special trainings on practicing that are coming up in a few weeks, and to receive your free guide to a super productive practice using the metronome. Finally, just a few words about the Mind Over Finger tribe. This is my private Facebook group where I pop in once a week to talk about mindful practice and answer your questions, and where you can exchange with fellow musicians about practicing and music making. You can find the tribe at facebook.com/groups/mindoverfingertribe. So that's it for today. Again, thank you and à bientôt.